Dive Podcast, straight talk on politics, national security, and America's future. With Robert Johnson and Linda Miller, we cut through the spin, tackle the tough issues, and give you the real story behind today's headlines. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell to stay informed.
We know you're often looking to get up to speed on complex topics and, well, quickly.
Yeah, time's always short.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into something pretty intense. It's about living under occupation for 6 months in Russia's Kursk border region.
A situation that's been called unprecedented in recent Russian history.
Truly. And the key here, what makes this deep dive possible, are the sources.
Right. We're drawing directly from firsthand accounts, people who are actually there in the village of Nikolaeva Darina.
Ordinary people sharing their experiences. It gives such a powerful, intimate view.
Absolutely. You get the day-to-day reality, not just headlines.
So our mission, if you like, is pretty straightforward. We want to understand what that occupation felt like for the people living through it.
Day after day, week after week, what did that mean practically?
And while it's specific to this one village, Nikolaeva Darina, these stories, they echo experiences from other occupied places, don't they?
They really do. It highlights those universal challenges civilians face when suddenly their home is a war zone. How fragile normal life actually is.
So the material we're looking at, it pieces together what happened using these residents' own words.
And you hear about everything. The constant fear of shelling, for instance. That became just part of life.
Families huddled in basements, sometimes with young kids, losing loved ones. And drones, the ever-present threat from drones.
Yeah, those artillery strikes, they can just flatten homes, infrastructure. It defined their existence for those months.
It paints a really stark picture. We hear about, trying to tend a garden, just normal life things.
But under this constant shadow.
Exactly. And then the terror of neighbors being killed by drone attacks and these almost unbelievable moments.
Like what?
Well, being given sweets by some Ukrainian soldiers, but then facing grenades from others. It's that constant unpredictability and threat.
That whiplash of experience.
Yeah.
Wow. And how do they cope? What precautions did they take?
We'll get into that. But first, what also comes through, amidst all this hardship, is this incredible resilience.
Oh, absolutely. Especially from the women whose voices we hear. You feel this deep connection they have to their homes, their land.
Yeah, families who'd never wanted to leave, they'd built their whole lives there in this small village right on the border.
So even as things got worse, say heading into 2024, shelling getting more frequent, drones becoming constant.
Right, even then, many initially held on to this idea that they'd somehow be safe, that it wouldn't really hit them directly.
It's that human tendency, isn't it, to cling to normalcy, maybe a bit of denial, even as danger escalates.
For a long time, the direct impact was limited, which probably fed into that feeling, like it won't happen here.
But then August came, and that sense of security just shattered.
Completely. The invasion began, artillery fire erupted, people scrambling for their basements, not knowing if the village would survive the night.
That initial chaos, the sheer terror, it comes through so vividly in the accounts.
And basic things gone. Electricity, gas, making the shelling, the drone noise even more terrifying.
Amplifying the fear.
And then there's this moment of sheer panic. Residents trying to evacuate, but being turned back.
Turned back by whom?
Armed soldiers with blue armbands, which led to this awful uncertainty where these Ukrainian forces in their village already.
Ah, right, because blue armbands are often associated with Ukrainian forces.
Yeah.
That must have been incredibly confusing and scary.
Totally. It just highlights the fear, the fog of war, the misinformation right at the start, not knowing who was who.
Just disorienting. So, forced to stay, what do they do?
They adapted. Life moved underground.
Yeah.
Literally. Families crammed into damp basements.
Sharing tiny spaces, basic survival became the focus.
Yeah, and as weeks turned into months, that initial shock gave way to this grim routine, just trying to survive.
And you see that ingenuity by hardship forces, right?
Yeah.
Cooking outside over open fires.
Finding water. They cleared out an old well, apparently. That became critical.
Relying on each other, sharing whatever meager supplies they had.
And yet, even in that, these little unexpected moments, like Ukrainian military personnel sometimes sharing food rations.
Giving sweets to kids, you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. It's complicated. Not black and white.
It really makes you think about the individual human interactions within the larger conflict, doesn't it? You have the occupation, the threat, but still these moments of, shared vulnerability, maybe even kindness.
But that underlying fear, it never left. The shelling, the drones overhead, it shaped everything.
How so?
Well, they took precautions, hiding things like camouflage clothing, deleting photos from phones.
Out of fear of the occupying soldiers, presumably.
Exactly. Fear of being misinterpreted, seen as a threat.
Which shows the level of scrutiny they were under. How even ordinary things could suddenly become dangerous in the eyes of soldiers in a war zone.
Then, as the occupation dragged on into September, the Ukrainian military set up a more sustained presence.
Right, moving into the village more permanently.
Yeah, even taking over civilian homes, which of course brought more anxiety. And looting started happening.
The appropriation of property. Cars, household items, farm equipment. That erosion of order. A huge challenge for locals.
Yet, even then, attempts at normalcy. Or connection, at least. Kids, like Rita and Natasha mentioned in the accounts, found ways to stay friends.
How?
Exchanging little notes apparently carried secretly by a neighbor.
Wow, small acts. But they show that enduring need for community, for support, even when things are terrifying and isolating.
But the fundamental question, day in, day out, was just survival. Finding food, water, safe shelter.
And avoiding the other dangers too, right? Like unexploded shells.
Exactly. Ordnance scattered around, down drones, the constant risk of just being caught in the crossfire.
They were repeatedly warned how dangerous tampering with that stuff was. Invisible threats everywhere.
Then October hit, and the fighting around Nikolaeva Darina got much, much worse.
The village essentially became the front line.
Pretty much. Caught right between the opposing forces, shelling became even more frequent, terrifyingly random.
That feeling of being trapped, with danger coming from both sides, it must have been psychologically crushing. No real safety anywhere.
And tragically, people died. An elderly neighbor first.
Oh no!
And then, Olga's husband, Vladimir, killed in a direct shell strike on their home.
Just devastating. Those personal losses, they ripple through the whole community. The human cost, right there.
And for Olga and her young daughter, Natasha, life became even more precarious after that. They had to shelter with neighbors as the shelling just kept going.
That reliance on neighbors, it shows how formal structures break down and these informal survival networks emerge.
Come November, things got even tougher. Food supplies dwindling rapidly, the constant sound of explosions, and the mental toll.
Immense, surely. Constant fear, uncertainty.
But they found these small ways to cope, almost defiant ways. Reading anything they could find, playing quiet games.
I read about a portable DVD player.
Yeah. Watching movies on it, powered by batteries they scavenged from downed drones.
Incredible resourcefulness.
Yeah.
Just finding tiny ways to distract from the fear, the boredom of being confined. Those little things become lifelines.
Communication was almost non-existent, just a single pocket radio, snippets of news, often contradictory.
And hope for liberation or evacuation must have felt so distant. Maybe even like they've been forgotten.
That cycle of hope and disappointment must have been exhausting.
Absolutely draining.
Then winter started setting in. Conditions worsened. Food got even scarcer. And the threat of violence never let up.
More tragedy.
Yes. 2 more neighbors died. They were trying desperately to get back to their abandoned homes, likely for food.
Just trying to get essentials becomes lethally dangerous. It underscores that grim reality death was a constant possibility.
And for Anna's family, December brought its own horror. Her husband, Sergei, was badly wounded by a shell.
Oh dear. Could they get help?
They tried desperately, but couldn't get him proper medical attention. He didn't make it.
Ugh, that's heartbreaking. It shows the total breakdown, doesn't it? No basic safety, no access to urgent care. Treatable injuries become fatal. That's the reality of occupation.
As the year ended, the fighting around the village was still intense, unrelenting.
Just endless terror.
But then, amidst all that, something unexpected happened. Russian soldiers eventually entered their part of the village.
More fear.
Initially, yes, but then, moments of connection, the soldiers shared some of their food, offered small comforts.
Really? It's so complex, isn't it? Even within that brutal context, individual soldiers showing basic compassion. That shared humanity thing again.
New Year's Eve was surreal, they described it. Fear, obviously, but also sharing a single can of pineapple, listening to music on a soldier's phone.
Trying to mark a holiday even then. That resilience, that need for a tiny bit of light in the darkness, it's powerful. But the anxiety never went away, I assume.
No, never. Always wondering what would happen next.
And then finally, liberation.
For Anna and her daughters, yes, in January, after 6 long months. But escaping wasn't simple.
No, I imagine not.
It was perilous. Crossing frozen rivers, open fields, still under threat of fire.
How did they manage?
They had help. Some of the soldiers actually helped them, risked their own safety. But then The tragic postscript.
What happened?
Anna later learned her parents, who had stayed behind, had died, and one of the soldiers who helped her escape was also killed later, a stark reminder of the ongoing danger.
God, even the escape is tinged with loss.
Yeah.
And Olga and Natasha.
They got out later in January, too. Another dangerous journey, full of fear. They also needed help from soldiers to finally get clear of the village.
So both families had these parallel, terrifying experiences, the sheer physical and emotional toll. It's hard to fathom.
6 months, constant threat, devastating loss, but also this quiet, incredible resilience.
Which really leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? Something for you listening to maybe reflect on. What is the lasting impact of living through something like that? 6 months under occupation. What does that do to a person, to a community, even after the soldiers leave? The scars, the rebuilding, the memories, they don't just disappear, do they?
A profound question indeed. Something to carry with you.
Definitely.
Subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. We are here to make things clear. New episodes every day.